quite a lot of interesting tournaments. I think maybe the one thing we should mention, which you didn't put in, is the first CS:GO major, because that I think is quite significant.
Write it in. Chalk it in.
Yeah, I'll put it in, because that was something I thought of on the way here. I was like, we should ask about that.
Yeah.
Which one was that?
DreamHack 2013. DreamHack Winter.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you were there with SK, right? With Twist and Zelos and Delpan.
Yeah.
Modding.
Oh, that was the first one.
Yeah, that was the first CS:GO major. That was the one where FNATIC upset the NiP in the final.
I played the first major. What the fuck?
That's crazy. And I wish
and
that was on the. I wish that was on the episode.
And I came last. How about that?
Oh man.
I just think it's really interesting to think.
Wait, you were recording?
I was, yeah.
You should put that in the preview. You should make that the preview. That was really funny. That was really good. I played in the first major.
Yeah.
I seriously did not think about that.
Welcome everyone. Welcome back to Leetspeak by Elite Klan. I'm Quacke.
I'm Tony.
And today we are joined by a very exciting guest, a longtime member of the Counter-Strike scene, and well, a favorite guest of my own. Welcome Pita to the show.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Right, so we're gonna kick off as we always do with our usual top three. So we would like you to name your top 3 favorite Nordic players.
All right, so I will start off with the legend, my biggest idol since I started playing. That is Spawn, all-time member of SK and IP. I think my first game that I ever watched was when he played against NIP in 2005 CPL Winter. So he was like my biggest idol, so I have to put him on that list. Then obviously I would have to put Forrest also. With no brainer to not have him on that list. He's been my teammate for a long time in I think three different lineups or 3 different periods during my career. I also had the opportunity to play against him as a player. He was also one of the guys that I looked up to a lot when I started playing. I watched him. I remember I was standing behind him in 2007, my first LAN that I went to. Back in those days, there wasn't that. I mean, you could stand behind the players and watch them play, something that is not possible today. But back then it was, and I was there early. I took the best spots, the best seats behind him, and I watched him play. So yeah, Forrest on that list, and third guy. Obviously, I've picked 2 Swedes now. So just to mix it up a little bit, I will go for my one of my old friends that I've known for a very long time from Denmark, the head coach today of Team Falcons, Zonic. I remember the same goes for that guy also. I watched that guy play when he was in MTW, and then I got to know him in 2008 when I went to a small LAN in Denmark. I remember exactly where it was. But I went there with him and one more of his teammates in MTW, and then 2 Swedes. We made like a Swedish-Danish mix. I remember sleeping on the floor in his apartment. And
it's the best kind of relationship.
Yeah. And I've known him ever since, and every time we have met, he's always been very genuine, very nice guy. He looks like a big teddy bear, and he is also a teddy bear when you meet him. So Zonic on that list as well.
Nice,
great picks. That's some all-time greats. I love that story about like the Forest like standing behind him and everything. That's the sort of LAN scene that I wasn't really around for, and I kind of miss that it doesn't really exist in the same way these days.
You should come to America, man. We're cramming into Airbnbs with like 9 people in a 2-bedroom room. It's great.
Dude, all right, I'd do that. I'd do that for sure. But yeah, all right. So Pita, as a bit of background, one of the things we have with this show is that sometimes we pick a guest who's done a lot of like this kind of media, And we don't really want to retread the old ground, so I'm just briefly going to summarize your 1.6 career and the early stages there. You did a great interview with Thorin, which is obviously very in depth. He's very good at that stuff. So, yeah, you started a career in 1.6 with names like Big Leap, Meteor Makers, FNATIC as well, and then you end up coaching in CS:GO. So we're going to start a bit later in your career, but there's one thing from the past that I do want to touch upon. And you played in the first CS:GO major at DreamHack Winter 2013 with SK. And something I've always wondered is for the people who were there in the first, like who transitioned from 1.6 into Global Offensive, what was that sort of feeling like being at the first CS:GO major?
Well, yeah, I mean, the overall transition, I think there's some similarities today with CS:GO transitioning into CS2. Back then, there was a lot of things that were not ideal. I think everyone still had the love for Counter-Strike as a game, and we just kept on playing it. And back then, Counter-Strike wasn't like a profession as it is today, where you just make big money. Depending on where you're from on this planet, you can not only make big money, but also establish a good future for yourself, but also future family and stuff. But back then it was just purely for the love of the game, for competing. And yeah, I mean, the game wasn't in the best state, but for me, who had been around a couple of years before that major, it meant a lot knowing that now Valve was actually doing something with the community. There was in 1.6 there were so many known bugs that they never even cared of taking care of. There's one famous bug flash on Nuke in 1.6 where you flash under a box on ramp, and the guy doesn't even hear the pop. He's just fully blind, no matter where you stand. You're just fully blind. Like that stuff went on for years. Obviously, there was some sort of gentleman agreement on the server not to use it, but yeah, I mean, so when Valve came in and made that first major, we started to at least for myself, there was some sense of, okay, there might be a future here, and also Valve coming in, putting in a lot more money than it had been in the tournaments when they started doing that. Then obviously there was a bright future for CS in general.
Yeah, it sort of exploded in the next coming years, and those years are sort of where we're going to start. We're going to start in that territory where CS:GO started exploding. I'm interested in that, the gentleman's agreement part, because I can't remember who it was, but someone we interviewed mentioned that there was, in the first major, there was a gentleman's agreement not to use the Molotov, in 2013, because everybody just thought it was so broken. Everybody just agreed, let's not use the Molotov at all. There wasn't a single Molotov thrown all event, pretty much. And I thought that was really interesting. You wouldn't see that today. I wonder, could you get something like that? Right now we have the snap tap thing. Could you get something today with the snap tap thing?
The jumping bug. You remember the jumping bug?
Oh yeah, that was.
They did a gentleman's agreement for I think it was Crackout 2017 when Big was using it and winning every Inferno game they played. It's about as all I can remember though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But all right, we're gonna move on. You did something that a lot of European coaches both have done after you, but at this point it was sort of early. You move over to America in around 2016-ish to coach with CLG, Counter Logic Gaming. So what was this transition like? Why did you decide to take this move to move continents as a coach?
Yeah, so previous to CLG, I had been with NIP. This was 2014 August, somewhere in the end of August, if I remember correctly, up until March of 2015. Yeah, so I had been with NIP for briefly a little bit more than a half a year. At this time in my life, it was I was in a scenario where I had to choose: do I want to keep doing my passion, doing competing in esport, in Counter-Strike in specific, or do I need to start working? I had studied prior to this on a university, and and I had this full-time job where I was working simultaneously while I was with NIP, and I just noticed like there's no chance that I could keep on doing like I'm doing, because I woke up 7 in the morning, went to the office at 8 or 9, came back at 5, then I met up with the players at 6, and then we played until 11, sometimes even 12, and the days were just rolling like that. So I did not have that much time off, but when I stopped with NIP, then my full focus was making a career for myself at the bank where I was working. And I enjoyed that. I have no thoughts of ever going back to CS. I watched a little bit. I wasn't watching everything, but I kept on watching CS. And then in October or November, I can't remember exactly what month it was, but I got a message from Tarik on Twitter in the DMs, and he wanted to talk. Obviously, he mentioned something about coaching, and then we jumped on a Skype call, me, him, and JDM, where we just talk a little bit. And they were in Europe at that time playing some. I think it was like a World Cup in Sears or something, and then we had a talk, and then we just went from there. I had a talk with the management, stuff like that, and then we're like, yeah, but you should come out, see if this is something that you want to do. And obviously, I talked to my employee where I was employed here in Sweden, and they were like, yeah, of course, you should definitely do that. I mean, moving across the planet and living somewhere where it's actually sunny, not like it is in Sweden, cold and dark all the time. Because I was living up north in Sweden also, so it's way worse than it is where I'm living right now. But yeah, so they were like, yeah, you should definitely do it. So we will give you being able to go there, but you could still be employed, but go there like a vacation-ish kind of. So I went there, and I immediately remembered why I wanted to do it. Also, the salaries had gone up a little bit, which meant that I could earn ish the same that I was earning while working full time at the bank. So I was like, if I can earn the same,
yeah,
I would definitely choose CS over the bank. So that's how that came with the CLG.
Yeah, and you spoke a name that I was going to throw out anyway afterwards. You coached Tarik, who went on, obviously, in North America to do so many different big and great things with so many different teams. But at this time, he was really young. He was the young Turkish-American gun that many people, maybe even today, don't know who Tarik is or was as a player. It's been, obviously, years and years ever since he's had that level of success. So who was this young Tarik to you? Because obviously as a coach you probably got a good feel for his strengths and weaknesses as a person and as a player.
Yeah. So one funny thing that I have to just mention is that when I had that talk with Tarik in JDM, I remember Tarik going through everyone in their team, who it was in that team. And as I mentioned, I did not watch that much CS during my off period. Obviously, I watched the biggest teams and the biggest games, but I never watched them play. So I didn't know anything about any one of them except a little bit for Tarik. And the only reason why I knew something like a little bit about Tarik was because he was known for playing without his shirt, like no shirt TV. That was his Twitch handle back then. That was the only thing that I knew. So then he started talking about, and I was like, yeah, how I had to like address it in a way that it wouldn't be too obvious that I didn't know who they were. So I was like, yeah, so how does like the lineup look going forward? Are you planning to make any changes? And he was like, yeah, we're going to have me, JDM, Cutler, and Hayes. I was like, yeah. I have no idea who they were.
Yeah.
So right after the meeting, I was like, okay, I really need to make some, like, I need to check who am I like supposed to work with. Who are these guys? And like, keep in mind, these guys were not like top 60, top 50 team in the world. I think they were like top 10, top 15. So that's how little I knew about them, and how little I was involved in CS in that off period of 6-7 months. But yeah, so when I came there and when I met all of them, I think they were like a bunch of friends that I was about to coach. They were not handpicked like, okay, we need this guy with this guy. It was just like a bunch of friends that became good together, and then getting picked up by an organization. Then of course they made some small changes, but the core was intact in that sense. And Tarik for me was young, but I think he was, as a person, he was as close to home for me, because I think the mentalities are a bit different American in comparison to European, but Tarik, he had that little bit of, at least what I'm used to. He was very friendly in that sense, wanted me also to feel as to be welcomed, if that make any sense. I remember when his family flew out to a tournament, he was like, yeah, you need to meet my brother, you need to meet my parents, my sister. So he was like a very genuine guy. Like when we watch him on camera, he has his persona, but I think when the camera is off, he's just a really chill guy, easy to be around, and obviously like a winner mentality, goofy sometimes, but yeah, overall like a 10 out of 10 guy.
Yeah, and you joined at an interesting time for this team. It was at that point where they had just, prior to picking you up, I'm almost 100% sure they had benched FNS.
Yep.
And I don't know if you had any involvement in that or any talks with them
yeah.
at that point. You did? Okay, yes.
Yeah.
Speak away.
Yeah, so when I came into the team, he was still part of the team, and we went to the first tournament that they played they played in December. I think it was Pro League, if I remember it correctly. It was in some studio in Los Angeles, and I remember us playing FNATIC Astralis, I think. No, we played Astralis. I remember that, and we did a lot of good, match prep before that game, and I think we did, challenge them pretty good. The reason what I'm trying to talk about FNS was that I noticed fairly quickly that he was micromanaging a lot, in that sense of European game style was a little bit more loose, while he was, instead of him calling, okay, let's do an A default, trying to work up our way on A, his call could be exactly the same, but he would say, okay, Tarik, you go underground, Cutler, me and you, we throw one each flat, so there was a lot of things that didn't make any sense to me that time. But also one thing that we have to keep in mind, which was the biggest reason for him being benched, was that coaches were able to talk back then.
Yeah.
Which meant that I did not see him as a dead weight in any sense, because he was a decent player, but he was a traditional IGL. If I weren't allowed to talk, I think he would have been on that team. But I saw the opportunity to get some fire upgrade while I was calling as a coach, which I eventually did, and that's why he got cut.
I remember this was a thing that was going on. Robin mentioned this as well, that this was sort of the idea when he came into FaZe. And if I remember correctly, I think that was one of the reasons when Starix came into coach for Navi and they cut their IGL. Was it Zeus they cut then?
Yes.
And it was like 2 weeks afterwards, Valve were like, actually, no, coaches can't talk. They can't talk. So they got completely messed up by that. But yeah, okay. That makes a lot of sense why it's around the same timing. So that makes sense why you would, in a sense, replace FNS like with your own voice.
Yeah, so I mean, as long as I was in a CLG, I remember I was able to talk. So, we had that major in Columbus where we made a really deep run. I think we made it to the Legends, like being top 8. Prior to that, we had some tournaments where we came like top 3 and stuff like that, and we were a top 10 team. And I wouldn't say that it was me because of me calling, but I would rather say that that rule enabled the teams to actually be way better in sense of firepower, in sense of being able to play together. Because me as a coach, I had the opportunity and the possibility to see all the screens at the same time. So I remember like I could watch, like, stand behind Tarik, and I see him and he's about to walk out, and at the same time I can see Cutler on the other side, and I need to make sure that their timing is pitch perfect. And I was like, Cutler, wait, and then I would just watch tarik. Okay, now tarik is out. Cutler, go. Boom. So it's just like perfect timing.
Yeah.
But if you don't have that possibility, which you don't have anymore, then timings can be off sometimes.
So almost combining some of this discussion about both tarik and the in-game leader situation, things along those lines. Did you ever see a world where tarik would become not only an in-game leader, but a major winning in-game leader, despite it only being for the one team? Did you ever see that in him?
No, absolutely not. I mean, obviously he's a very he can keep his emotions. Like, I think many people when they watch him on stream, he's like screaming, but he's more doing it, just to be a goofy, funny guy. But in terms of that having that mentality, definitely. In terms of in-game knowledge and doing all that boring stuff as an IGL, I did not see him do that, because I was very harsh on them at times as a coach, where I demanded them to do things that they were not used to doing. Like, one of the things was that I had like a rule is like no other games prior to a tournament except for CS. And those guys enjoyed not only playing CS, but also when they have their free time, their off time, they would meet up with their friends on TeamSpeak or Skype or whatever, and play some other game. But for me, that was like big no. Like, we just fully focus on CS, and if you don't know what to do, then you just hop on a server and try to maybe find a new smoke lineup or talk to your friend, your teammate on that side, what you need to do and stuff like that. And I remember like that was not. People were not happy about it, but they accepted it.
Sure.
But they were not happy. The only guy that was happy about it was JDM, and he had that work mentality. So to answer your question, in that sense, no, I did not expect tarik not only to take on the IGL role, not only to win the major, but also as becoming also the MVP. I did, however, tweet before that major that they were going to win it. I still have that on my
Yeah.
Twitter somewhere.
Wow.
That's a
So I
W.
called it. Yeah, I called it.
So as like coming from Europe, you've made this big move into America. You're there for a couple of months. I think you leave maybe 7 or 8 months afterwards at CLG. What do you take away from that period? Like, what did you take with you for the rest of your career?
One of the things that I think that I learned was, when I came to America and to the US, I was like, I had to figure out like, okay, Swedish mentality, Swedish players, but not only players, but like mentality overall. I think in Sweden it's like there's no boss in that sense. It's like very high ceiling. Everyone is supposed, needs to be able to talk to each other. While in the US it's more of a like linear, like a hierarchy in that sense. So before I went there, I talked to my boss where I was working. I was like, okay, how should I address, like, how should my leadership be working with American people? And he was like, just be yourself. But when I came there, I was like, I cannot just be myself. Like, I need to be someone else. Be more strict, more like when you watch the coaches, NFL or NBA or stuff like be more harsh. Not be the friend coach, but be more of the coach. And that's one of the things that I learned, is that it's really difficult. Like when you live with people, when you, as in CS, like as a coach, it's not only like in any other sport that you maybe meet up in the morning and for 2-3 hours, and then you meet up maybe 1 hour in the evening. In CS, it's like you're with the team more than you are with your friends, family, girlfriend, whatever. That means that there will be some cases where you will have to be yourself, and it's really difficult to be yourself, but also be that coach that you want to be. Like, it's really difficult to find that balance. And for me, that was a big learning, like something that I learned when I was there, because it was really difficult to be one guy, but in my heart, I wanted to be the other guy. So I learned that this was not something that I could, you know, hold on to forever. I needed to reinvent myself and be natural going forward. So that was one of the biggest things that I learned. But also, you know, stuff outside of CS that I learned being there, you know, different time zone, you know, being away from family. Like you started to appreciate things that you didn't appreciate before. It sounds like I went to war, but you know, there was a lot of things that you maybe took a little bit for granted when I was away. And you know, when I read about players being homesick, or when I read about, you know, Liquid being in Europe for 5 months straight and not being able to see their family, I know what they're going through, and it's not easy. And like, it's a big sacrifice. And you know, people say, but they're only earning big money. Yeah, money is not everything.
Yeah,
So
that's exactly it. Like people get a lot of shtick sometimes, like when they're having, you know, someone who moves continents and they get homesick. They have a lot of, like, everybody goes, oh, but they're being paid $100 like $10,000 a month to play video games. Why are they so, like, yeah, it's still obviously a huge deal. And like, there are a lot of like these cases that end up where that ends up being a big problem. Like the one I remember is like Obo in 2020 when he was in Europe. Like, of course, that was a big time. And what was it on, like 17 or something? Like he would have been, must have been crazy. And like, yeah, like it's very understandable that would be a problem for sure. And
yeah, and these
irony.
are children in many instances too, which is the most sad thing to read about. You mentioned Obo. That was probably the biggest and most shocking move, I think, in NA up to that point, maybe even afterwards, where it was kind of just like nobody had any idea what was really going on in the mind of a player like that. So yeah, definitely. But you do end up going home. You do end up finding yourself back in Sweden, and this is where you create a new project entirely. We were speaking a little bit about it in the pre-show. It's qwerty, the team that you had built along with Maikelele back in 2016. You started building it in July of that year, but things came complicated when Maikelele had to stand in for NIP. Wenton, who was also featured on this team along with Adder and Slap, was playing for FNATIC in the stint of Olafmeister in his injury. So what was the process of building this team, and what was it like in the very short amount of time that you guys actually ended up being public for?
Yeah, so we had to go back a little bit just so it makes a little bit sense. But when I was with CLG, we had I think this was DreamHack Austin, which was, I think, somewhere in April, May, something like that, 2015. We decided that we wanted to get rid of FugLy, who was a member of our team, and instead bring in Freakazoid, which had been with Cloud9 prior to that. We were, you know, more or less settled to get Freakazoid into CLG. But in the last second, he decided to go somewhere else. And that was EchoFox. So we ended up being just 4 players, and we tried to find a 5th. And the management in CLG, they were very much, you know, allowing me to find the player that we wanted. So I was very much in charge of who to bring in. And one of the players that I wanted to bring in back then was Maikelele, who had been a part of NIP when I was with them. But we got a lot of backlash. I think it was mainly from JDM. I think he was a little bit maybe scared of being, you know, maybe challenged on that op spot, even though Maikelele said that he was willing to play the rifle role. So we went on with, you know, trying to find another player, but nothing really happened, which ended up me playing. And when I started playing again, you know, I think I had some decent game. I can't remember exactly which game it was. It was sometime during E-League. And then Maikelele, because we just had previously talked, he was like, yo, you need to start playing again. I have talked to some of the investors from Astralis, which also were the guys behind Blast. They were behind Heroic, and they were behind a team called Nords from Norway. So they had 3 teams, plus they had Blasts. And you know, then I came back to Sweden. We met up at a very fancy restaurants in Stockholm. Obviously, they paid. But yeah, so we sat there and talked, and then everything sounded really good. And we agreed on salaries, and I think the salaries were very decent. We had a lineup already ready. It was me, Maikelele, it was Slap, who today is the assistant coach of NIP. We had Venton, who was a team player, and Utter, the fifth guy. And while all of this was happening, then all of a sudden, Venton gets an offer from FNATIC to be a sub for Olofmeister. And then Maikelele also for NIP, so this deal just fell through, and it took a couple of months, and then both these players, Maikelele and Venton, came back. We formed this lineup. We obviously had really high hopes, but yeah, didn't go that well. So that was that.
Yeah, that's completely fair. I think having high hopes is definitely something that that's a good thing in almost all instances of teams. And I also want to just once again plug the Thorin Reflections that you had done, because you talk about that just about as in depth there, and that's where the information came from first, or many people might have heard it. But even so, regarding the FugLy removal and the addition of Maikelele, just touching on that because it was something I was curious about. What were some of the other names you guys were interested in? Because you mentioned NiKo in the Thorin one, and I heard somewhere, and this could be completely crazy, but I don't remember where. Magisk was at some point in the conversation, and then he had gotten the offer from Dignitas instead while he was on Team X, I believe it was, or something along those lines.
Yeah, we had quite a decent, looking back, those names that I was looking at, they were not high profiles as they are today. Like back then, obviously I knew about them, but they were not internationally super good. I think NiKo was a bit earlier, or maybe it wasn't. It was, yeah, this is almost 10 years ago.
Yeah,
I remember I tried to get NiKo onto CLG, and I remember that I had the management actually doubling his salary, just to get him to the US, but he was very young.
The mouse salary?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
yeah.
That was I think that was pretty big to begin with. I think it was.
It was decent. I wouldn't say compared to today, not even close.
Sure.
But the standards in Bosnia, where he lived, and that salary that he had in mouse, that was like a 3 or 4 like 3 or 4 salaries from a normal guy, like for a doctor, So obviously he felt good, but he could earn double in CLG. I think the main purpose was, I don't know if his parents weren't allowing him to move across the globe to pursue his dream. I can't remember him ever saying that he really wanted to come. It was more like, do you want to come? And then took some time, and then was like, yeah, no, I'm not going. And right after, when he said he's not coming, then he, you should come to Mouse instead. And then Mouse tried to get me in as their coach, but I didn't want to go there. So
fair enough.
Yeah, he backstabbed me, I backstabbed him.
Yeah, there you go. The old 1-2. No, but what? But just one more time, was Magisk ever on the table? Was that something that ever actually happened? A conversation?
Yeah, I cannot say that with 100% guarantee, because obviously this was a very long time ago.
Sure.
But I do. Something tells me that I tried to get him. I remember Pimp. He was a player back then. He also reached out, but we ended up not bringing him in. But there were a couple of players, mainly from Europe. We also had some US guys. Stewie, I remember, was on the table, but that could have been earlier also.
Yeah.
That would have been very early in his career.
We could jump into a ton of different players.
Tony does very good research when it comes to these roster moves, because I remember when we talked to Robban, he was like, "Oh yeah, you guys were playing with Scream, right?" And Robban was like, "Yeah, we played with him for like 2 days. Like, how did you know that?" It was,
Good job. Fun fact, just for shits and giggles, I have an entire spreadsheet long of roster moves that never actually ended up happening that have been accumulating. So yeah, I think they're really interesting to talk about. So I just have them in the backlogs. But
yeah.
So,
Something tells me Magic's thing was, yeah. I think you're right.
Okay. I like to hear that. But you guys end up in Europe once again, and you and Maikelele are teamless once more. You had built a project, didn't quite work out. You wanted to bring him onto the project prior to that in Counter Logic Gaming. That didn't pan out, but it eventually all comes together in some beautiful way in a FaZe Clan lookalike Dignitas team that has JChem, Fox, and then the addition of Rubino as your fifth. And you're playing still. You are the in-game leader and captain of this team. So while this was an interesting team, I think that it goes without saying that maybe it lacked a little bit more identity in the firepower. And I want to know what your thoughts were in building this project in the beginning, if this was always the set 5 that you were going in towards with it, or...
Yeah. So I think the overall thing was me and Maikelele, we were like a duo. He had obviously previously talked to Fox, who he had been a teammate of in FaZe Clan like a year before that. They ended up not on very good terms when they were together in FaZe Clan. I remember I was actually with Maikelele when he got the message that he was going to be cut. I was in the room, which was super awkward. That I was in that hotel room. I won't go into any details with the respect of those players, but yeah, they eventually, became friends on talking points at least, and wanted to make a team. JChem was also a part of that team, and I think Rubino was the reason behind Dignitas happening because he was a player of Dignitas before, so he was the guy responsible for that. Yeah, it was basically just the 5 of us. We didn't have a coach coming into that team. I think the management side towards CS maybe not, that into it in that sense. We did talk a little bit briefly with them, but they were not, super, engaged in that sense. Then eventually, as the time went on, we did get a coach, Zeus, not the Brazilian one, but the Norwegian one. And yeah, I think...
Is that how that's pronounced? I actually never knew that.
Yes, Zeus, but I think Seves, maybe Seves. Yeah, maybe not Zeus.
Well, I have no idea. I was just
me
curious.
neither.
Anyway, sorry to call you out on it.
Yeah, no. Norwegians are special. Everyone in Sweden knows that. Okay, but yeah. Where was I? Yeah, so I think like the overall idea with the team was good. I think our biggest issue was that we were playing ECS, which was the Face It like league back then. We had that spot with Dignitas, and I think the first 2 games we just couldn't get our lineup to play. Like we had to use stand-ins. Like I remember the first game that we played, we had Pimp and we had someone else, which and then eventually when we got to play with our full lineup, then I think we played some online qualifier and we lost to some Danish team on a lot of overtimes. And I think I remember I played really poorly, which I took responsibility for. But I think I can't remember exactly how things went. But I heard that I got benched, and then obviously Maikelele also. And if I remember correctly, they kept on being a team, bringing in 2 other guys.
Yes, they did.
But yeah. So it was a very short stint that I had with them. I was, super happy that I got the opportunity. But as always, like when you take that step, becoming a coach, it's very difficult to ever get back into playing. Like not even just taking the step to becoming a coach, but also being away from like professional CS. Like when you're away for like 6 months and more, I think it's really difficult to get back. Like the only player that I could ever think of actually came back to his normal standard is Device. But the rest, obviously they could play, but they were not the same players. Like if we look at Olofmeister, like that guy was a fucking beast.
Yeah.
And then he had this injury, and then he had his personal reasons taking a break, but when he came back, it was not that old Olaf Meister. And I think we've had a couple of more players going that road also, trying to get back, trying to be the player that they were. But, something happens. I don't know what, something happens. And everyone has that dream to be able to play, because it's way more funny to play than to coach. But, I think that Dignitas team made me realize, okay, it's enough.
Yeah. I was going to say, actually, just before Quack gets into his spot, is that I think a lot of coaches, not a lot of coaches, rather, a very select few coaches think and do have the opportunity that they can come back and play. And you're in that same bracket, I guess, like Zeus. He, the Brazilian one, came from coaching that SK lineup to then in-game leading for Immortals. After that, that was a crazy switch up. So, I mean, honestly, truthfully, like, good for you. Like, go get your money and go get your opportunity to play, I feel like, at that point. Get it out of your system fully. I think that's a pretty valuable thing to have.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have been in on that road. Not only, as I mentioned, not only coaches, but players also, like Kirby, who was, I think he was an MVP for that Astralis lineup when they won the major, if I remember it correctly.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah. Now, he tried to play again, didn't go that well. So there's a bunch of guys. I could just name drop a lot of players that tried to get back, but something happens after 6 months. And whatever Device did, he could make lessons for the future generation of players on how to get back. Yeah.
I was about to say play like Device.
play like Device.
Yeah. You mentioned the name several times in this, and we have it in our scripts pretty much everywhere. But someone who has followed along with you throughout your career is Maikelele, and that might be something we could touch on. So, like, you guys are, when you follow someone along, like in the career-wise for this long, you're obviously friends. Can you speak something about this relationship that you two have?
Yeah, I mean, I knew Maikelele from way back when he had a different nickname. It was Eksem, which in Swedish, I think it's like some.
It's a rash. Yeah.
Then so I knew him like way back. He was always like a level below the professional level. And then when CS:GO came, he did as a lot of other players did. That was, just grinding 100%, while the older generation, me included, were, a little bit more laid back, playing, not putting in that big of an effort as he did and other players. But, he became a really good player. I remember I played him in 2013. I was just setting in for an event, and, I remember he was just stopping us. And then we became teammates in a team called Team Property. And at this time, we got to get to know each other better. I think he's a super chill guy, fun to be around, and I think he was a really, really good player overall. And then I had the opportunity to bring him with me in NIP, even though maybe I wasn't, the guy deciding to bring Maikelele in, but I just gave the management in NIP my honest opinion about him as a player, and I think he would be a good fit for that team, which I think he were. But yeah, I think we have been in different lineups with different players, and I've known him for a long time. I'm gonna be honest, I have not had the time to meet him or talk to him not a lot the last couple of years, but he was a really good player, and I'm sad that he weren't able to continue his career as a player.
Yeah, that's definitely hard watching your friends at that point and then drifting apart. Definitely, he had a good run, I will say, after you guys had separated. He definitely had a good run. Probably, honestly, put a lot of players on the map with the opportunities he provided. I'll also say, but
he's one of those guys I think should have done more, but he did. He couldn't. He had the talent to do a lot more, but like luck just doesn't go your way sometimes, and he could have done a lot of great stuff.
Yeah, I think his biggest issue was that he was maybe not that good on the personal side, trying to understand how your teammates are looking at you, like in what way they're looking at you, because I think in order to be successful in CS, you either have to be like fucking really good in this game, like simple, and then you can be whoever you want to be. Like no one will replace simple, like prime simple. Like it doesn't matter if he's screaming at his teammates or if he's the best teammate ever. Like that factor is not interesting. So either you have to be the best, or you have to be decent, but you have to at the same time be a really decent teammate. And I'm not saying Maikelele was not a decent teammate. I'm saying that he didn't know how he had to develop himself as a person. And back then, we didn't have all these tools around how to develop players outside of the game. But I think one of the main reasons why he did eventually get benched from NIP was because he was not trying to blend in with the group. So
I
the
see.
group, the group of the 4 players had their own chemistry, and he was just an outsider. So I think that was the biggest reason. Like if he had just kept on developing himself as a player and be a little bit more laid back and trying to listen more to the older guys and trying to be one of them, I think he definitely would have been in that NIP lineup, because they played really good. And I remember, a lot of times when me and Forrest talked Get Right later on in our careers, I don't know how many times they said that, it was a big mistake for them removing Maikelele and then taking in Alu. But, so obviously they made a mistake, but I think Maikelele made the first mistake, and that was not blending in.
Yeah. That's interesting, actually. I never really thought about it like that. Blending in, I guess. Blending in, meshing in a different way.
Yeah.
But yeah, you did actually go back to Ninjas in Pajamas. So you did have more time to speak with these guys. It was 2018, after you had a little bit more time as a player. I think you just subbed, or whether or not it was just for fun in the meantime with Gux and Friends. You'd played with actually some pretty interesting names there, and namely woxic. But I'm not sure if you have anything to say about him now that he had his career after that fact. But if you do, feel free.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember that lineup coming together. I think it was the manager of woxic and one more Turkish player.
Mini,
exactly. Their manager, because they played in a team before that, and they had the spot to the league below Pro League.
MDL, yes.
Yeah, so they just messaged me and said, do you want to play with these 2 guys? We will add 2 more players, and I was like, yeah, why not? The same went there. I did not know much about woxic nor Mini, but one thing that I when I got to learn these 2 guys, especially woxic, was that he was very, very motivated. Screaming, like even during practice, he took practice as an official, like pumping, the teammates. So I think it was a really, really good teammate. Also, he was really, really good as a player, and he kept on improving. And me and him, we managed to stay in touch. So whenever we had the opportunity to meet during an event, we could, sit and talk. I remember one time when it was the Face It Major in 2018 in London. I remember me and him just like taking a cab. He was from Mouse and I was with NIP, and then me and him just went into the city just to see London. So we had a really good relationship, even though we never worked with each other on a professional level. I think that team, I wouldn't call that professional when we play together, but yeah, really good guy. And
yeah, that's awesome. And then right after that, you rejoin NIP, and then you also start initiating, obviously not you yourself necessarily, but you start initiating roster changes. This is Xizt, who's been with the team since the beginning, slotted out for Dennis. So during this period of time, what was it like to adjust to a new system of in-game leadership, and what do you think brought on such a change? Because if I had to look at those 2 players, Xizt and Dennis, they're not exactly in the same bracket as captains, I would say.
Yeah. So the whole NIP thing, I got a call from HEAP on, this was in the end of 2017 or just in the beginning. I just like look at my phone, I see HEAP and he's calling me. I was like, what the fuck is this? Because I was at this time working full time at the bank, so I remember exactly where I were in the office. Some things in life you just remember exactly where you were. But when he called me, I picked up and he was like, yeah, do you want to are you interested in coming back coaching and working with us in NIP? And I was super excited, but I tried to stay cool. And I was like, yeah, why not? Let's meet up and have a talk. And he was not able to be present for the meeting, but I met up with Hisham, who was the CEO or still is the CEO of NIP. I had briefly met him before when I was at NIP in 2014. So I met up with him at the NIP office in Stockholm, and we talked, and everything went really good. I think he was my thought of him as a person at that meeting was super chill guy. But I remember him asking me, like out of nowhere, what do you think about Dennis as a player? And I was not prepared at all for that kind of question, and I immediately knew what he was trying to ask about. And then Dennis had played with FNATIC prior to that. I think he maybe also had like a small stint with Godsent, and I was like, yeah, Dennis is a super good player. Everyone like knew how good he was with the pistol, and I said like he's a super good player, but instead of who? I remember I said it exactly like that. He's a good player, but instead of who? And I never got the answer from the CEO. He was like trying to maybe dodge to answer that question. And yeah, he was. We just left it like unanswered in some sense. So I ended up signing for NIP with Xizt as the captain, and we met up at the NIP bootcamp offices, which is in the south of Sweden. And I met the whole team. I remember Draken was that guy coming picking me up at the train station. It was like a 20-30 minute drive. That was the first time meeting him, and we had a good talk on the way to the office, and then we start working. My approach in the beginning was the first week I just want to watch you guys play, and I just try to absorb the team chemistry and how you're working. I will try to be working as little as possible, and everyone was cool with that. So that first week I was just watching. Sometimes I could not hold myself of saying some stuff, but overall I was just a spectator. We went to US in Los Angeles playing a tournament called the Summit. With that lineup, we were there. We did not perform that good. I can't remember exactly where we ended up in that tournament. But on our way back then, we're now going back to the airport to LAX in Los Angeles. We are in the lounge because these guys were traveling that much, so they had like the diamond cards of Star Alliance, so they were able to get into the lounge. I did not have that access, but they were like, yeah, you can just come with us. I felt like a superstar going into this lounge, free food and drinks, whatever.
Yeah.
So I'm going in there, and I take a seat, and while I'm seated, I'm just sitting, and then I get a call, and I see on the phone, I see Heaton is calling you, but also Hisham. Like two people. I was like, okay, this is something serious when both of them are calling at the same time, like a group call. I answer, and they say, yeah, we need to talk about the lineup, blah, 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 blah. Long story short, they say, we want to cut Xizt, and we want to bring in Dennis instead. What do you think about that? And I was like, no, I don't think that's a good decision. And then I remember them saying, yeah, but Dennis has said that he wants to be an IGL. He thinks he can do it. And I was like, yeah, I've heard that story before. People saying that they can do something, and then when things doesn't go the way they want, then they just throw in the towel. But then in the end, I remember Heaton saying like, okay, this is a management decision. We will not interfere with how you want to have the team going forward, but right now we will take the decision for you. So we will be removing Xizt, and we will be having Dennis instead. While all of this was going on, like this is a 20-30 minute call, just so you get a grip. While all of this is going on, I'm seated in the corner of the restaurant, and I'm seeing Xizt walk and grabbing like food from himself, and he looks at me, turns around, looks at me, and it's like, do you want anything? While I'm on the call of him being removed. And I remember like this was so painful. I cannot describe how I felt in that scenario. And then I asked him like, how do you want, like, are you going to give him the news? Should I, like how you thought about this? and they didn't. And obviously, I think both of them were like just happy not to have to take that decision, or not the decision, but to take that talk. And I was
Wow.
like, you know what, I will do it. I don't want to have him not knowing it. And then they were like, yeah, but maybe we should not tell him before the flight because it's a long flight, and maybe the flight will just be super painful for him. So let's wait until we land in Stockholm. And I think that's how it went. So for 10 hours, 11 hours, the direct flight from Los Angeles to Stockholm, I didn't say anything. And obviously, then when we landed, I told him, and I think he took it pretty cool. But he is a guy that's not showing too much emotions. But I don't think he was happy with it. Neither were I. The players in the team were not happy at all. Like Forrest and Getworth was super annoyed, and I had to take them in a room. This was like a week later. I took him into the room. It's like, guys, okay, this is out of our hands. Like we have two options: either we're super pissed about it and not work, or we're just like, okay, let's be professional. Like this is the way it is, and if we're not happy about it, okay, don't resign next time, and go find another team, or maybe let's create a team by ourselves where we are the guys deciding who is going to play or not. And I obviously the talk was way more in depth, also me listening to what they thought. But I remember that once we went out of that room, they were like accepting Dennis in some sense because he was in the room above at that time. So that's how the whole Dennis minus exist thing went.
That reminds me, like that seems like a running thread throughout NIP's history. This sort of kind of story. When you hear from some other players and some other personnel, and Zeus, the Brazilian Zeus, just left Liquid the other week, and this is probably a good place to bring this up. Or the other month or whatever, he left Liquid, and he did an interview with HLTV just recently when we're recording this, regarding his relationship with Liquid's management, which he perceived to be sort of disconnected to the team as well, and not really having, not really accepting everybody's opinions when making decisions, not really accepting the will of the team. And we see this in a bunch of different teams, like again and again. And how do you, so obviously you have some experience with this. This was a managerial, like a top-down decision that didn't involve you whatsoever. And maybe you didn't agree, maybe you didn't agree with the decision entirely. Maybe you didn't agree with the timing. How do you feel about this? Like, what's your experience with this sort of relationship?
Yeah, I think one thing about esports, like in general, what I think is that it's so fresh, so young, that we don't have too much to fall back on. Comparing to other sports, like they've been around for so long that there is like everything is just worked out. Everyone knows exactly how things is supposed to be done. No one is trying to reinvent anything. It's just like, okay, this is how things are supposed to be done. In NIP back then, I think them taking that decision, overall, like having management taking the decision for the team will only work if the manager, in that sense, knows what he's doing. And I think in NIP back then, Heaton having his experience, of course, but the game had developed so much from the time he was off until that point that he was just strictly looking into, statistics. I would say I cannot speak for him and Hisham, but I think that was the way that I went for them. Like, okay, Xizt is posting, I don't know, 0.95 rating, Dennis is posting up 1.20 rating. Okay, if we get a guy a 1.20 rating into our team, obviously we will be super good. You can say the same thing for any football team in Europe. Okay, let's put in Zlatan, Haaland, Messi, Ronaldo at the top, and we would just, score 10 goals every game. But it's not that how things are working. And once you have been in this loop as a coach for a long time, also as a player, you start to realize how a team needs to be addressed, how a team should look like. And I think a lot of these managers today, they don't have that experience. At the same time, they don't want to look weak in front of their players, in front of the management above them. So they want to take those decisions. So they're stuck in some some sort of a limbo. They don't know exactly what to do, and sometimes they take the wrong decision. And I think the approach that NIP has done recently with bringing in Threat as a GM, I think that's a perfect scenario of how things needs to be done. Because as I mentioned, like the experience of making teams in CS, there's not a lot of people who have it. You know, I think you need to go through a road where you have a lot of bumps, but also you have good periods, because you know when you're winning, everything is fine. But when you're losing, that's when you start to challenge yourself as a coach. Like, what have I done wrong? And then you know you have that trajectory going back up, and you're winning. Okay, that worked, and then you start falling again. So you know you're learning from wins and losses. And I think to be able to get to that point, you need to, like, there's only experience, and you can only gain that by going through all of this. And I think, you know, Zeus, as you mentioned, you know, I think he has gone through that, and him not being addressed at all how the team should look like, I think that's a big minus. With all the respect for their manager, Joka Steve, you know, he has also been around for a while, but you know, how much does he actually know about the dynamics in CS? And you know, when you're just listening to the team, we kind of get back to the whole thing of, you know, looking weak to the players or looking weak to the upper management. Like, it's really difficult. So I think the steps that needs to be taken forward for every team is doing exactly what NIP is being doing. And if you are the manager and you know that you don't have the experience, then you need to hire someone who has the experience. You can still be the manager, but you need to have that extra guy on your right or on your left telling you what the right move is. Not, you know, putting the full trust in the players to take the right decisions because they don't also know it. You know, we've seen a lot of these teams trying to make, you know, these roster changes that doesn't make any sense, and they try it and then they fail. So I think going forward, what the organizations has to do is, like, look at who they have in front of themselves. Is it a new coach with little experience? Okay, maybe we should not have him that much involved in who we should bring in. Maybe, you know, have Zeus as the GM, and at the same time have Mither as the coach, but Zeus is the one taking the calls. Maybe, you know, they can do it together, but Zeus should be that guy because he has the experience. But you know, when you take that decision away from him, then you know it's difficult for him to own something that he's not the owner of in that sense. So yeah.
Well, on the topic of roster moves that don't make very much sense, we can put ourselves back on track a little bit here with a couple of puzzling ones for me. At the time of the Dennis era of NIP, you guys make a move that I don't think anyone other than maybe Liquid had done with NAF for JDM at the time, in benching your AWPer and then picking up a rifler, traditionally a FNATIC alum again, Lekro. After this, it's minus Dennis plus Draken, minus Draken plus Dennis, and minus Dennis plus Plopski. So a very back and forth period of time for you guys trying to figure out your roster. So can you kind of give me a look into the mind of what was going on in the team at that time to where you would bench your AWPer and pick up a rifler?
Yeah. So when I came into NIP, they had a mental coach who was with that team, also with the previous coach before me, which was Threat. And he, like, one of the first things that he told me when I came was like, Draken, there's no hope for him, in sense of how he is as a person. And I was like, yeah, sure, there must be. Like, no. So I was like, okay. And then I had that in the back of my head and trying to, look at him, how he was as a player, without going into much of a detail what he did. But, some of the things that he did was not on the level of a professional, if I can say it like that.
Sure.
So we had to take the decision to remove him. I think he was a super, super fantastic player, especially at that time, but also today. I think he's putting up really good numbers with his team that he's playing for today. But yeah, it really sucked removing him because I think he was a really good player. But I think also when you take away the professional behavior thing, I think he was a really cool guy also to hang out with. Like, he wanted to do stuff when we were traveling somewhere. He wanted to experience stuff, and I think that was really important for the team as a whole. But we had to take that decision of removing him, and then the obvious choice would have been, okay, let's replace an AWPer with an AWPer. But as you mentioned, Liquid had removed JDM getting NAF, and Liquid just super good. Like I don't know if that was exactly when they had their best period or when they were just about to, have that Intel Grand Slam run. But I remember them being like a solid top team without an AWPer. And at the same time, I had Forrest, who were known to be able to AWP.
Right.
I had Dennis, who was also pretty decent with the AWP. Get Right was fucking awful with the AWP, but he never took it. Then I had who more? Rez, he was also very decent with the AWP, and Lekro, also pretty okay.
Of course.
So I had four guys who were able to AWP, and in my head it was like, okay, Liquid have made it work. Maybe we can also make it work. At the same time, I have four guys. Maybe it's actually not that bad of an idea if my opponents never know who is going to bring that up. Because if they know that Draken is always having the op, they know how he is moving across the map. But if Forrest is picking up the op, okay, they don't know that connector on Mirage is where the op is at,
Interesting,
or
yeah.
Lekro at B. So they might get caught off guard in that sense. So we tried that, and that was not a major winning move, but it was not that we were falling out of top 10. I think we were, as long as I were there, I think we were within the top 10, or at least moving around it. Maybe one week or something that we fell out, but we were always moving in within the top 10. So that's how that went. Regarding minus Dennis plus Draken, minus Draken plus Dennis, that was actually us going to China, and we were about to fix the visas. So we were in Stockholm to fix the visas at the Chinese embassy, and then we just got a call from Dennis. He was like, "Yo, guys, I'm super burned out. I need to take a break." And then we just realized, okay, we're about to go to this tournament.
Oh.
Okay, we need to get a sub really fast. So I remember I went out and then tried to make some calls, but we could not get a decent stand-in for that tournament. So we were like, okay, we took a collective decision, and we're like, okay, we're gonna skip out this tournament, which was WESG, I think they were called, like a Chinese super big tournament. Like first prize was insane back then. But yeah, so then Draken was like, I'm down. I talked to him, and I was pretty straightforward with him and saying like, okay, Dennis is his absence is due to health reasons. Once he wants to come back, he will come back. But talking with Dennis, he was like, okay, I will most likely be out for 2-3 months, which meant that I told Draken, you will be playing these and these tournaments, and Draken was like, sure. And at that time, Draken had the offer from Gamer Legion, which was with Scream, with Existence, and I can't remember who the other player were. But he eventually decided to, not take that offer and instead come with us in an IP. So that's why we brought in Draken. He knew he was a sub, but not for how long. For him, as I realized later, he not only was he a sub, but he also tried to prove for me, but for the rest of the team, that he had what it takes to be a professional again. So I think he behaved super professional. He was, always on time, listening, doing everything that I wanted him to do. But then Dennis decided to come back way earlier than he thought, and I could not have my ordinary starting player sit out because this was due to health reasons, nothing else. And as a person, as a human being, you have to respect that. And I told him, once you're ready, you're welcome back. Whatever you need, if I can do something, I will gladly help. So he came back way earlier, and that ended Draken's run with us. And I remember for how long it was. I think it was like 2 tournaments or something, like super short stint. So that's how the things went with Draken.
The idea about having like the unpredictableness of the AWP, like having no one specifically on the AWP role, I feel like that's not an entirely bad idea in a modern context, because today the AWPer is moving around quite a lot. Like you're not necessarily moving the AWP around between different players, but like the AWPer is not really in like the same set position. Like especially on CT side, the AWPer can just pop up pretty much anywhere. So that's not an entirely new idea. Like in teams right now, you have like Xizt HooXi. Oh, he can be literally anywhere. He can be on A, he can be on B, he can be on mid. Like he could be anywhere with the op. So, yeah,
The
that's
biggest difference, though, that I
yeah.
just want to point out, the biggest difference with Xizt HooXi and if I compare it with my players that I had back then, is that it's one thing to op on the CT side. It's a totally different thing to op on the T side, because at the T side you need to actually search the angles. You need to know exactly how you need to approach things. Some things you need to have a teammate flashing for you to take the peek. Some things you don't have to, need to have the flash. But my players back then in 2018, they could play the op, but they were not like the opper on the T side. They were just one guy, picking up the op. But if they were about to run into Xizt HooXi in a duel op versus op, and my guys were on T, like Xizt HooXi would win 10 out of 10 times. While as if I had draken op versus op, draken T side, Xizt HooXi CT side, then draken would win some of the duels. So that's the big difference in terms of having a dedicated opper. And I think a lot of times we're forgetting about that there's actually two halves in Counter Strike, and one half do you have one synergy, and on the other half you have a different synergy. But I think I think that's why a lot of these teams don't make it work, because like not having that op, being like not having the opponents being afraid of a good opper, it's super difficult, because like imagine if you guys are playing and you know that you're not playing against a good opper, like you're not afraid to just swing out connector on Mirage, or swing out short on Mirage, whatever. Like you will, but if you know that you're playing against a good opper, you will think of, he might be holding me, he might be behind the boxes holding me, and he's not missing his shots. Then you think one extra time, you maybe ask for that extra flash, and that extra flash is just you telling the opponents what you're trying to do, because they hear where the flash is popping. So there's you can go into very much in depth into details why having a respected opper is important. And Forest is respected, Dennis was respected, the same for the other players, but they were not respected as oppers. And I think that's the biggest issue that we had. Like Cloud9 most recently also had that issue when they lost Shiro. Like they're respected as players, but not no one is respecting Boombla as an opper, for an example, especially if you're Xizt HooXi, if you get what I'm trying to say.
100% do. You do pick up an opper. Get Right's benching following that whole situation came twist. A player that NIP wanted for a long time, a player that at different points in history, FNATIC were interested in and actually got on their roster. And finally, they got him. And I don't know if this was partially due to you being there, but I know that you played it with him before. I know that you had a history with him. So what was it like now having a primary op-capable player in Twist at this point? And what did it really mean to the team to finally get him? Were they interested in that?
Yeah, I think they had tried to get Twist for so long, as you mentioned, and he declined them every time. And it was not that he was declining them because he had a better offer. It was him declining them because he wanted to play with his friends, which didn't make any sense for anyone on that team. So even like before Maikelele, even before Alu, like that's the period when they tried to get Twist, and he was like, no, I want to play with my friends.
Oh wow.
Yeah, but then as time went on, he I think he matured a little bit as a person. I think he was a little bit maybe shy. If I can say it like that, I think he was shy as a person. I think he was maybe a little bit afraid to taking this step. Once he got a bit older, I think he got more mature, and that's when he, when I remember when I asked him, it was like, yeah, like he really wanted to come. And I think having him as a player also in that team, I think that was really good. Like he was a guy who was actually able to like blend in with the rest of the team. I think they worked really good together, that team. And then also we had the Plopski. So I think we had a really decent team, but unfortunately we didn't have the chance to be together for so long.
Yeah. The next pickup you make is Plopski, and this is a pretty exciting move in my opinion. And I think in a lot of people's opinion, especially then. He was one of the really big up and comers in NIP. He was only 17 when you picked him up. Which even then it was extremely young. like to step up into a team that was contending for like top 10 at this point. So what do you like? How do you feel that? How do you feel like this move worked out for him? Because he's not there anymore. That's for a lot of different reasons. But during your time, how do you feel like Plopski integrated into this team?
Super good. I think I told his parents about it, but I think they brought that kid up really, really good. I think he was 17 on paper, but I think he was like 25 in real life. He was getting along with the guys really, really good. I think he was a really interesting player when I watched his demos, because I knew that Get Right was about to leave. Was it Get Right? No, sorry, Get Right on a later stage. Yeah, Plopski felt right in that sense. He was young. He was not expensive to get for the organization, and he, the talks that we had, he felt like a good guy. And for me, it was very important when I brought him in that I would not just put him into positions where he's not comfortable. I'm gonna put him into positions where he's actually able to be confident and to be able to shine. So I remember I asked him, tell me exactly what positions you want to play, and he said, on this map I want to play there, on this map like my favorite position is this, blah 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 blah. We ended up maybe giving him like 90% of the spots that he wanted to play. We gave him that, and I immediately saw that he was not only confident playing on his positions, but as time progressed, his teammates got like, wow, this kid is really good, because they did not know that much about him. They did not put that time and effort into watching him play before him coming into NIP. And I remember us going to Cologne in 2019, and 17 years of age, his first big tournament, playing on the stage and actually playing super good. I think Plopski was a really good pickup for that team. I think his biggest issue as a player was that, or as a person, was that he's a very good guy, and he did not, make sure that he got to do what he wanted to do. I think that was something that eventually got him benched, because as time progressed, they started adding new players, and players who actually have, some sort of demands on how they want to play. And Plopski being like, yeah, fine, I can take Monster on overpass. Like the most boring position that you can play as CT on any map is Monster overpass. And he took that, and once you're starting to get cold, you're checking the scoreboard and you see that your teammates are up on 15 frags while you're down on 3. If you're young, if you don't know how to handle that kind of pressure, you will eventually start to question yourself. Am I actually good? What has happened to me? Why is my rating below what it used to be? So you start to overthink a lot of things, and I think that's what happened for Plopski, and why he also eventually became a bit more worse than he was when I was with NIP.
I hope to see him rise to the same level that we saw, because he's young, still super young. Like you said, you picked him up when he was 17. But
Yeah.
looking good in this Metasport team, and the Metasport team looks good as well. I'm sure moving forwards they'll do great things as a core. But even still, after NIP, you then transition into the Copenhagen Flames. This is your first full Danish team, and as far as I'm aware, only full Danish team that you've coached for. So you were only here for about 3 months, and we'll get into what followed as you eventually joined Dignitas after this roster. But very, very prolific roster in the sense that it was picked apart one by one after the fact by all these different teams. So you were there. What was it like during these runs where you had obviously a really good showing at IEM Fall for your roster, as well as at the Stockholm Major?
Yeah. I remember I had been away for a long time. Obviously, also I didn't want to do anything coaching related because I had my ESIC ban. So I think I was away for maybe 1.5 years in total. And then I read somewhere, either it was on Twitter, that they were searching for a head coach. I was like, why not? I messaged them. And obviously they were like, I remember Warburg, who was their head coach. So not head coach, but he was the GM back then. And he was like, this might be a step back for you in your career. And I was like, no, I just want to get down working. I had watched some games of them, and I actually saw that they had really good potential. And then we had a long talk with the players, me myself included, and they, asked all these questions. And I remember HooXi was also asking me like the questions about the ban because he wanted to know. So he was being very straightforward. And then we started working together. Everything felt really good, and my whole thing was that I saw that this team was already a pretty decent team, like in terms of things that they had set up, how they need to address a couple of things in game. So my whole thing was, when when you come in with experience, when you have worked with big players, the players that you are working with currently, if they look up to the players that you have worked with previously, anything you say to them, they will trust you. Like even if it's a lie, a white lie, obviously a good lie, then obviously it will be good for them to hear. So I told them a lot of things. Like I told them, you guys have the best communication that I've ever heard any team ever have that I've worked with. Like the major winning NIP, your communications is 10 times better than theirs. And they were like, oh really? No. And obviously that was not the case. But I was just giving.
Obviously, I was lying.
I was just trying to give them all these, extra things to get their confidence up. And then when we were going to this IEM fall tournament, I had a talk with HooXi before, and I was like, okay, we're just going there and we're just taking it, game by game. And for us, this is just learning. Like, I think he knew, and I think I also knew, like we were not going to go far. Like we maybe get some rounds against G2. We might, make an upset here and there, but for us, it's just learn and then on to the next tournament. And then, we get to that tournament, and first game, I think we're playing G2 and we're beating them on overtime. And I think, once we saw that we could actually beat, one of the best players in the world at that time in that team, then everything else just becomes a lot more easier. And we went unbeaten in the group, and we had G2, we had Big, we had the Fun Plus Phoenix, which later became ENS, I believe. So I think that team, I think there was a lot of good timing and luck, and CS is a confidence game, and they got their confidence up, and we just kept on having that confidence from IEM fall, going into the major, going 3-0 in the first Swiss stage at the major, barely losing to NIP in the last game in the second stage on overtime on Ancient. I will never forget that game. Us being able to play in there in the arena. No, I think we did a really good job, and obviously the players did a fantastic job. I think they worked really, really hard. I did receive a lot of help also from Vorborg, who was the general manager. He was subbing in for me as a coach because I was not able to be standing behind that team due to my ban. So I think in general this was a really, really good team in terms of players behind the team, but also players in the team. Everything was super good. And when we did that major run, obviously this team came out of nowhere. At least on the international scene, it came out of nowhere. And all of a sudden, I started to get a lot of praise as a coach. And organizations were like, okay, we need to get this team. And we had like a couple of talks, and I remember like Complexity was actually the team that was like most interested. Like we already had agreed on contracts with Complexity. And but at the same time, Dignitas approached me, and it was a dilemma for me back then.
Yes, you do move on to Dignitas. I did want to touch on one thing now that you mentioned Copenhagen Flames. What is your take on HooXi as an in-game leader? Because that's sort of when we're recording this, it's a couple of weeks out. He left G2, and I'm curious. Like, what's your feeling about him?
As a person, I think he is very much straightforward. For any guy who is from Scandinavia watching this, he is maybe a bit too much straightforward for the Scandinavian type. For any guy from the Balkan region or from the US, he's normal in that sense. He says what he thinks. as a player, I think he knows it. Everyone knows that he's not obviously, the super fragger, but he has like scenarios in the games where he's actually, doing things that are really difficult. He is not crumbling under pressure. In that sense, when you're expecting the best players to take the shot, he is the one actually stepping forward and taking the shot and enabling the rest of the team to eventually pick up. As an in-game leader, I think he's by far the best that I ever worked with. I think he knows a lot of stuff about the game, but also him being prepared. Like he's taking CS super serious. He's not trying to leave anything, um, he's not trying to let something just come naturally. Like if he can control it, he wants to control it. Like if he can watch a demo of his opponent, he will do it. So a lot of these match preps that I did for the team, like I heard that he already looked at the demos. Like he knew what I was about to say. He knew what I was about to talk about. While the rest of the guys were like, "Oh, really? Okay, so NiKo is playing on that, but okay." And they were flashing. Okay. He was like, he knew exactly where the flash is popping. He knew exactly how they rotate. I think in that sense, like he has that mentality where he's like, he actually believes in that working hard is something that will bring you titles. And I think that kind of mentality is not that easy to find in CS. I think most of the players on the top scene are putting in the work, but there's a few that actually put in that extra work. Like if you compare, I don't know if you guys have seen that documentary of not The Last Dance on Netflix, but there was the redemption team of the U.S. national basketball team when they played the Olympics with Kobe Bryant and with LeBron James and all these guys. So all of these guys were like the best of the best, and then they had Kobe Bryant. And there was one sequence in that show that describes HooXi for me, and that was when LeBron James talked about Kobe, and I was like, okay, they got a night where they could just do whatever they wanted to do in Vegas, and everyone went out gambling, drinking, partying, whatever, except for Kobe Bryant. When they got back to the hotel at 6 or 7 in the morning, everyone drunk, they met up with Kobe Bryant coming out of the elevator, him about to go to the gym. That's the kind of guy. When I saw this, I was like, this is HooXi. So that's that guy for me. Like he will not only will he put in the work, but he will also naturally, with a little bit of demand, but naturally he will also make his teammates also follow him. So he's not only coming in with a good work ethic, but he is also the other players are also going to work maybe not as hard as him, but they will put in that extra work. That's why I think he is a really good player, and he's, from a coach perspective, I think he's the player that you always want to have on the team, because it relieves a lot of pressure from you as a coach. A lot of pressure. Like for me, for example, if I have to always call the players and you need to work, blah 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 blah. But if you have a guy in the team who's like naturally wants to do the work, then he will relieve a lot of pressure from you as a coach, which means that me as a coach, I can think of other things that are more important than to hunt the players and tell them to watch a demo or work on this site or whatever that might be. So he is a asset to any team, not any team, but to a team where he has really good players around him. That's what I think about HooXi.
I'm glad I asked that question. That was it paints him in a very good light. But all right, we move on. You eventually leave Copenhagen Flames. You join Dignitas. You reunite with some of the old NIP guys. First of all, this must have been kind of crazy, like reuniting with Forrest and Friberg after this long of a time. But how did this come about? Like, how did you come into that picture?
Yeah, so during this major run, I remember that they had a after party, Dignitas, with one of their sponsors. They had a party in a well-known club in Stockholm called Spy Bar. They had rented out like the whole club basically, and they asked me to come. I could also bring my teammates, which I did. So HooXi and then everyone else came along. I think everyone else did. At least Jabi did. He was really fun to party with. Okay, but when we came to the club, I remember them was like all of them were like, "Holy shit, you did a fantastic job!" And when I heard that, I knew what they were about to say. And then they were like, "Yeah, do you want to come?" And Forrest talked to me, and you know, when you're talking to, obviously I had worked with Forrests quite a lot, but this is like someone that that I had idolized for a very long time. And when you talk to a guy like that, you know, you cannot just listen to what he says and be like, yeah, whatever. Like you're actually paying attention to what he said. And I remember that he said that he really wanted me to come, that he enjoyed working with me with NIP, and now they wanted to remove their coach, which was Vendetta at that time, and they wanted to get me. And then obviously Friberg also chimed in, hallzerk, and who was the last guy? HEAP and someone. Yeah, I can't. Yeah, Lecro.
Yeah.
So yeah, they wanted me to come, and I remember FugLy. He was FugLy. He was the GM of Dignitas, and he messaged me. We had a talk, and no, I think they gave me a pretty good offer. Not as good as the complexity offer, but the thing with Dignitas for me back then was that I had like two roads to go. I could either take Dignitas, where I would not only be the coach of the team, but they also gave me the opportunity that I could move into a more laid back role whenever I wanted to. If that was a year after, or 3 years, or 5 years, like more managemental role. That was something that was interesting for me because obviously I was above 30 years, and you know, with the whole, you know, getting a family and stuff like that, I thought that was a pretty good deal for me when I look at the whole package. At the same time, you know, complexity, the deal was better with complexity in terms of money and the contract, but complexity was, I knew that, you know, all these players that I had, all of them were more or less, you know, green in sense of playing everything that they can play. So I just saw in front of me that we will be away for 200 days a year, which means that I will not be able to see my daughter. I will not be able to be with my family, and I felt that I was not ready for anything like that. So the Dignitas decision was not made upon the professional, like, or the result wise, because obviously then I would have stayed with the Flames guys, but it was more of a security kind of decision for me. And I do regret it today that I went that road, because I never talked to the Flames guys about it. But you know, when I took my decision, when I told the guys on TeamSpeak, I remember they were really upset about it. Like they even canceled the whole day after, because they felt that they didn't want to play. They were not like mentally, they were not there when they realized that I was leaving. And then I remember HooXi messaged me and saying like, why didn't you say any of this? You know, we could have found a way to work around it. Like you wouldn't have to come on every boot camp. You wouldn't have to, like, we could have found a way to work around this. But you know, I have already put the pen to the paper and things were already too late. So that's how that went.
Wow. Yeah, that's quite a dramatic exit out of that team. But yeah. But all right, so you end up with this bunch of players that you had before. One of the players you had in the previous NIP lineup was friberg, who at that point was playing alongside Xizt. Xizt was the caller. Now you come into this Dignitas team where you have friberg instead as the caller. So as someone who's sort of seen him in both stages of his career, so to speak, both as a caller and as a not calling player, how would you contrast these two players? Like, what was the team any different, or was it like they had the same sort of style?
And might I add that FugLy had described friberg as one of the dumbest players he'd ever played with back, obviously, a very long time before that. But he became an in-game leader in like 2016, I think, or maybe even 17. So I just thought that was funny.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I think FugLy and friberg, they have a really good relationship. I think that was friendly banter.
Yes, 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 yes.
I don't think he's that stupid at all, to be honest. As an in-game leader in comparison to Xizt, I think Xizt just had the calmness, like the natural.
The north of Sweden calmness, yeah.
Yeah, there was so much confidence in his calls, like everyone believed in it. The difference with friberg is that he was a little bit more emotional, which for some players, for some people, might feel like he's a bit stressed. And I think that was the biggest difference between those two. I think also Xizt had way more experience. I think that also came with the confidence that he knew that he had been doing that for a long time, so he was not stressed at all. But I think friberg maybe choked a little bit in that regard as an IGL in those big games. But I think in general, like if friberg had the opportunity to keep on going, I think he could become a decent IGL. Obviously, fragging wise, I think he was also, in comparison, I think he was doing good. I think there was a lot of things, and I remember me and him talked a lot, and one of the things that I did was I compared him way too much with HooXi, who I just had previously worked with. And HooXi was, he had studied the game. He knew exactly what the answer is for 1+1. Like he didn't even have to think. He immediately knew, okay, that's 2. While friberg, he maybe took it a little bit more on the fly. 1+1, okay, 2. So that extra second gave HooXi way more advantage than it gave friberg. So we had a lot of time where we trying to get that strat book, playbook into his head, reactions, what we need to do when things are happening. But we never. I think we never got the chance to go all the way since Dignitas all of a sudden decided to withdraw, which sucked.
Yeah, it must have. Bit of a rug pull there when they just kind of. It seemed like a very sudden decision. But 2 more players you played with in this roster, hallzerk and HEAP. It was Dignitas was like their first big chance. Both of them have moved on to different teams. hallzerk is in Complexity and HEAP is in Eyeballers. What's your take on these 2 players? Like, was there a feeling like, oh, we've picked up 2 very great young talents, or was it more, how was the feeling?
Yeah, definitely. I think those 2 guys made really much sense in that team. Having forest, friberg, and the Lecro with experience, and then having these 2 young guns, super individually strong. I think it made a lot of sense. I think HEAP was super good team player in the regard of knowing his place within the team. He was not trying to take too much space and attention. I think his biggest issue was that we tried to have him, at least I wanted to have him as a more of a star player within the team, having the best spots. But I think him mentally, he was not a star player in his head. It's one thing being able to play those positions, but you also have to be able to demand things from your teammates during the rounds, during the games. And he didn't have it because he was more of a good guy in that sense, as a person. hallzerk, on the other hand, I think he was really good with the op, and like a good teammate overall. I think that group of guys was very enjoyable to work with them. I do, however, think that if we just had a little bit more time to work with the team, I think we would eventually, get over that bump. I remember Forrest always talking about, we just need to get over that bump, and we will take away. And we were so close so many times in that short of period. But unfortunately, the economic post-COVID started to come into effect, and the investors behind Dignitas decided not only to cut us, but also to cut a lot of positions within Dignitas. And that was how that went.
Yes, you do get cut eventually out of this team right after the RMR tournament, the qualifier. You lose some very, very close games. I remember watching these games, and it could have been so much more. I felt like in all of these games where you ended up losing out. Versus you beat Game Religion, you lose against Eternal Fire, Outsiders. But that's sort
Do
of.
you remember that Eternal Fire game, by the way?
I think so. I think I remember watching it. I don't remember any details.
Okay.
I do.
Okay, I would just put it there because we're playing Vertigo, and I think the result is like 9-8 in our favor or their favor, around 10-10, something like that, or maybe even 11-11, whatever. But it's tense, and they're going up A. We're playing CT, Eternal Fire RT, and they're going up A ramp.
I'm visualizing this actually while you say it.
And there are 30 seconds left of the round, 30 or 40. friberg kills 2 or 3. It's a 2v4 situation, and all of a sudden, with 20 seconds left, they were like, "We don't have any bomb."
Yep,
The
and
bomb hasn't spawned.
wasn't in. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I remember this now.
Yeah.
Oh.
So they replay the whole round. We lose that following round, and we eventually lose the game. If they had the bomb, we would have won the round. In my opinion, I wanted to be fair play and say like, okay, let's just replay the round. But in my heart, in my head, it was like doesn't matter if you had the bomb.
Yeah.
The round was already over. There's no way that you're winning that scenario. Like impossible. They weren't even on the site. They were still in ramp on Vertigo 2v4.
Wow. Yeah, I do remember that. Now that you mention it, I do remember that. That was kind of crazy. Yeah.
I was watching that major, and like full transparency, I was watching that major, and I was like, this is Dignitas' last shot. Like they got to make the major. They got to do something here. I don't really have any faith that this roster is going to stick. And dude, it was just hit after hit, unfortunately for you guys with that. And then obviously the next game, I believe you almost actually won out to knock out Outsiders because it was so tight in both maps. It would have been an insane team to knock out at that point too. But even still.
Yeah, I mean, we did really good match prep against Outsiders. We knew exactly how we were supposed to play. And, you know, the thing that I regret most with that game, obviously I was not able to be behind the team. But what did happen was that we used our analyst at that time, who's Shedan, who is today's, he's working with Heroic as an assistant coach. And he was the guy standing behind the team. Obviously, like super fresh in sense of being a coach. So he was way more laid back then, not maybe having the authority that he should have had within the team. But one thing that happened to us in that game was that we knew exactly how we wanted to play on map 1 and map 2. And there was a lot of things that we purely won just thanks to those, the match prep. Then coming into the map number 3, I told Shedan that, okay, map 3, the match prep, we're going to leave it until map 3 comes, because I don't want the players to know map 1 prep, map 2 prep, and map 3 prep. Like it's too much because the game could just end in 2 maps. So let's just fully match prep on map 1 and map 2, which we did as a team. And then if we're about to play map number 3, which is overpass, because I already had visualized how the ban pick process would look like. If we get to map number 3 overpass, I told him, I want you to go through the match prep with the players before the game. We have 15 minutes and you just take 10 minutes out of those. So the rest of the 5 minutes, the players can go toilet and do whatever they want. And then, you know, I don't have any contact with the players or the team whatsoever during this whole game. And I knew exactly what Yakindar was doing in that game, and he was always as T on overpass, walking mid and just fully walking down the stairs in middle, right next to the balloons, walking down the stairs without any smoke, without any flash, without anything. And I told hallzerk, position yourself every time on banana. That's what I wrote in the notes. And then I watch the game and I see Yakindar is doing the same thing, but hallzerk is not there. hallzerk is on long. hallzerk is on B. I was like, what the fuck is going on? Why are we not doing the match prep? And then once the game is over, I got told that the match prep wasn't done. There was not Shedan's fault. He felt really bad that the match prep didn't come to the players, but it was more of the players. I won't mention any names, but it was more of the players were like, no, we don't need a match prep. Let's just play our game. And he was like, okay. And as a coach, if a player tells me something like that, first thing I do is give him a slap, and the second thing is that I tell him the match prep.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, that is how you should handle a situation like that. I guess.
Wow.
Don't give me any lip, boy.
Yeah. Oh, that really puts into context like how much the ESIC ban must have really done. Because imagine how different these games could have been if you were there. Like that's Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
So if they knew, we could have beat them. We could have maybe got to the major. Maybe could have done something. Maybe Dignitas would have still been there. Maybe Forest would still be playing because
my
of like
God,
that
sticker
small
money too.
butterfly effect, you know.
Yeah.
That was one
So-
of those majors where the sticker money became really huge as well. Like that was like post Stockholm and Antwerp. That was like how
Yeah.
Bad News Eagles, how they could live for the entire year. That was just the sticker money. So that would have been a huge source of income for
Yeah.
Dignitas, I assume.
Yeah.
But all right, Dignitas is over at this point. You return on 00 Nation, another international lineup. How did you come about building this roster?
Nothing. I have nothing to do with that team. Nothing about building. I think that was one of the things that I forgot to mention about with Zeus and Liquid, but the same thing happened for me in 00 Nation. I basically got picked last. The management had decided that they're going to assemble the players and then coach, which I think is not the way to go. But I think overall, the players that they did manage to get, I think it was good. I think if I was a part of the process, I think I would have done the same. But I had nothing to do with putting the lineup together. No.
All right. Now you at this point you work with birdfromsky, Danish IGL. But before that, what were you sort of doing in between Dignitas and 00 Nation? There was a bit of a gap in between there. This like what was going on there?
Yeah. So right after Dignitas, I remember I did get a couple of offers. I can't remember exactly. I don't know if I should name drop the organizations, but there was some pretty good teams, I would say, that I did get approached by. Okay, I will name one. I will leave the rest out with the respect. But I did get approached by EG to work with them, and they wanted to do a dual coach setup with Warburg and me. And I think Warburg maybe was one of the guys who initiated that idea that I should work with him. They had not decided who was going to be the coach standing behind the players and all this, but he wanted me to come. And then obviously for me it was important to see, okay, what are we working with? And then when I heard the players, it wasn't that I was like, hell no, but at the same time I was not convinced that this would work, and I was afraid of me taking that job, that it would maybe ruin my chances of continuing as a coach. So I never said no, but I maybe like, I think the CS management, I think they sensed that I was not interested, and I think they eventually ended up going with Malik, who was G2's coach right before that. That was one of the offers that I had, but as time went on, at that period, my daughter, she was born on the 4th of July. Let's go USA. She was born on the 4th of July in 2022. So that was just at the same time as Dignitas disbanded. And I was like, okay, either I can be with my family now, be present, be home, or I can take another job and be away. So I never felt the need of going away anywhere. I wanted to take the right decision. That's how I felt. I really wanted to make sure that if Astralis comes, knocks on my door, I will obviously take it. Or if Vitality, or like one of these top 10 teams, if they ask me, I will go. But I will not take a team just to take a team. I want to make sure it's the correct decision. And once I let the time go, then as always in esports, if you're not being seen, not being heard, then people start to forget that you exist. So that's what happened. I think I was ready to get back to work in the end of that year, but it took me an extra 6-7 months before I got the job with 00 Nation.
Yeah, and you do land here. You work with birdfromsky, a very interesting player in my opinion, because he has sort of, he came into the competitive scene quite late. He's always played a very specific kind of style, like sort of in a sort of unique way. What was your relationship like with him coming in? As you say, coming in like in post, like this team was already built for you. Like how was that for you?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things for me was obviously just to get back into the game, like a similar scenario as it was with Copenhagen Flames. Like I just wanted to get back to work, so I was not, I was not that picky in that sense. But at the same time, I knew like the players that I had to work with. I was like, this is actually a pretty decent team on paper. It looks really good. And the Bird, I think he was the reason why I was brought in, because he knew the players from Copenhagen Flames. He knew like all these guys in Denmark, and he talked with them, and they, said good things about me and the period that we had together. And for him, it was like, yeah, if he's available, let's get him. So, I think it was. I think we had a really good start. I think Bird is a really smart guy in terms of CS things. Like he is you have IGLs who are followers in terms of they're learning from their opponents, or they're learning from something that someone else already has done. And then you have a few like the small percentage of IGLs who are the teachers, who are teaching everyone else how to do things, how to use a scenario as smoke, a flash, a combination, whatever. And birdfromsky is that kind of guy. He did use a couple of smokes. I remember one specific smoke that was used in one of the pro games not that long ago on Vertigo, on sandbags. It was like a one-way, a very deep one, like a waterfall smoke. And I remember the casters were like, "Holy shit, what a cool smoke from Spirit," or whatever that was, But Bird showed our team that smoke like 10 months prior to that, and how to work around that smoke and how to do things. So he's a trendsetter in that sense. So he's very smart in that, in being a in-game leader. I think one of the things that he's, the things that maybe he is lacking a little bit is, I think he is very similar to Cadian in Liquid. I think a lot of people are asking themselves why Liquid cut Cadian. I think Cadian is playing in a CS that is not that everyone is confident with, doing random stacks in the middle of a round based off intuition, not based off information, but based off intuition. We saw Heroic do that with Cadian, and they managed to make that work so many times. They managed to make the retakes work so many times. And birdfromsky had that same kind of thought process as Cadian. The problem we had in our team towards the end was that people were not fully buying into it. And when all this happened with Liquid, what everything that has been said about Liquid and why it didn't work with Cadian, I just see the similarities to Bird. So I think I think if he's working with players that doesn't bring that much experience with them, I think exactly how Cadian was with Heroic when he brought in all these Tesses, Shush, and all these players. Obviously, they had some experience, but they were not someone who is going to tell you how you need to play. They were not Twists who had been winning with FaZe Clan and seen how Kerrigan worked and be like, why would you want to stack B in the middle of the round? Like, why would you want to do that? We never did that in FaZe. Well, what should we do here in Liquid? That kind of conversation, I'm pretty sure happened in Liquid. And the only way for Bird, or not the only way, but the easiest way for him to work with the team is him having players that fully buy into his idea and how to play. Same for Cadian. So I think he's a fantastic player. I think he's a really nice guy also to be around with. A really like a guy with a big heart, I would say.
Yeah, and then close enough to the end here, we can wrap up with just these final two questions before the ultimate finish.
This is a long one. This is a long one, guys.
Yeah, this is a long episode. We might have to split this one in two, but we'll see. We'll see how we
I
can
talk
break
too
that
much.
apart.
I'm so sorry.
No, don't say that. You've spoken enough.
Your job is to talk a lot. That's why you're here. Yes.
Yeah.
But of these experiences, of all of these different coaching and playing things that you've had go on from the top to bottom, which of them has been the most fun, I guess, so to speak, out of these excursions? And what would you say is the one that you've learned the most from?
Sorry, which team was the most fun to work with? Or
And then yes, and then which one would you say that you learned the most from working with?
I
Whether
would
it be as a
actually,
person or as a
yeah,
professional.
I have to put the time in CLG on both.
Oh.
I think the group was super fun. I think the whole whole experience of being like living in the US, living in California. I think that was, and CLG is the answer to both of your questions. With all the respect to my other teammates and other teams
Sure.
that I've had, but I think just like as a person, as a human being, experiencing something like that, totally new, outside of my comfort zone, I think that was definitely the best experience that I had.
And really all that's left is, are you still looking to coach? What is Pita looking for right now? What is out there on the horizons in terms of what you're still on the lookout for in your future?
Yeah, so for the future, obviously, I would love to get back to the coaching and bring my experience that I've managed to get past, what is it, 15 years as a professional. If that is to be a head coach or if that is to be more of a general manager, it's yet to see what will happen. But I definitely want to stay in this industry, in this community, because I love it. Yeah,
I think
most
anybody
of my life I've been here, so I would love to keep on being able to keep on being in this game.
I think anybody would be lucky to have all of the experience that you have personally. Not on a you're my guest on the show level, but not very often will you find somebody where you can say, okay, yes, I've had over half a year in America. I've had X amount of experiences with international teams. I've been in national teams. You know pretty much from top to bottom how these things go. And you've also been with management that you've had to handle or at least deal with. So there's a lot of these different situations where I think that you'll probably bring an invaluable level of experience to a team.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
But all right, this has been a very, very long episode, but it's been a very, very entertaining one. So we like to cap this show off with a question we ask every guest, which is, who do you think we should bring on the show next?
Who would you like to hear from? Oh, Spawn.
Straight out of the gate.
Spawn.
Yeah.
Yeah. We need to know what he's doing today.
Yeah, we have to track him down. So we can.
I can help you.
Show. Oh, all right.
Oh, all right.
Excellent. We might actually get Spawn on the.
I didn't think that would be such a quick answer. He was ready for it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that would be a very interesting perspective. So yeah, I would love to have him on. But all right, Pita, where can people find you? We're about to end the show here. Where can people find you online in case they have contract offers?
Yeah, I think Twitter is the best. You can just DM me, or I think Twitter is best.
You have good
follow
takes on
Twitter follow me and I will know.
Sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, good stuff. But in that case, we're about ready to cap off the show. Tony, any closing thoughts?
Nope. I've got everything that I wanted to say out of my system. I pretty much built this one. Quack, unfortunately, had a lot to do this past weekend, but I felt really, really satisfied with all the answers I got. About an hour and 42, hour and 50 we're pushing now, so.
Yeah, we're approaching the 2-hour mark. You might be right that this might be a two-parter. But yeah, Pita, any closing thoughts?
Super. Thank you for having me, and long show, but it was fun talking to you guys, and thanks for great questions, interesting questions.
Thank you for coming on, and well, yeah, guys, this has been Leetspeak. I'm Quack, that's Tony, and we'll see you in the next episode.